Okay, I'm gonna make a proper pattern for this, my first pattern, but I am making a shawl out of 3-color linen stitch. I think it's also called woven stitch and then moss stitch if you do crochet, but this is knitting. I'm basically mushing these two tutorials together, but I couldn't find resources on how to do this anywhere else, so I'm going to make a resource. Okay, so basically the important part is that we're able to continue with the pattern. So when I'm making increases, I'm doing cast on increases so that I don't interrupt what's happening in the middle here. There might be better ways to do this, I just haven't experimented with it yet. But I'm making increases in multiples of 2 so that I don't disrupt my pattern and I can make it continuous. So what I do is, this is the front of my work, I take the color that I was just knitting with previously, and then I do a backwards cast on. But the key here is, depending on what side you're on, you always want that yarn to come out towards the front. So I'm going to knit in my 3-color moss, linen, whatever, all the way across. And then when I get to the other side and I start on my next row, instead of doing a normal backwards loop cast on, I'm going to go in the opposite direction so that my thread is still coming out towards the front of my work, if that makes sense. And I'll show you a few rows here. So I backwards loop casted on 2, 1, 2. And then there's other tutorials for this one, but just to rehash what you're doing here, I'm going in a sequence of my colors, so RGB. I just did green, so blue is next, and it's on this side nicely. When I'm on the front of my work, that means I'm knitting, but I'm also slipping stitches. And you slip the stitches the opposite of how you're knitting or purling, right? So knitting happens in the back. I'm going to slip my stitches in the front. So since I just did a cast on, I'm just going to slip a stitch normally, purl-wise, like that. And then what I'm going to do, it's hard to do this with my phone and my shirt, but I'm going to put my yarn in the back, tighten this up, and then I'm going to knit a stitch normally, tighten that again, and now I'm going to slip a stitch with yarn in front. So the slipping is happening in the front because I am now knitting in the back. So that's all I'm going to do, is I'm going to be slipping these green stitches with the yarn in front, knitting. And then I go all the way to the end like I just showed you. And then I will show you what the other side looks like in my pattern. Now I've gotten to the end of my row. You'll remember we increased on this side. Now to increase on this side, I'm just going to cast on again like I showed you, but at the beginning of this new row. But you'll see we're on the wrong side. And I want to make sure that my cast on tail is going towards the right side. So instead of a normal backwards loop cast on, which would be twisting it this way, I'm going to twist it this way instead, and then I'll pull that tight. And I'm going to cast on 2 of these. And then I'll show you how to do the sequence on the opposite side. So remember what I mentioned, we're slipping and either knitting and purling, so this is the wrong side, so we're purling, but then that means that the slip needs to happen on the opposite side. So we're going to slip in the back and purl in the front. So I will slip the first stitch, which you have to hold tight because it's just a cast on. And then I will bring my yarn up and I will purl. Sorry, it's hard to do this with my phone in my shirt right now. In the front, like so. There we go. And then tighten that up, slip with the yarn in the back, slip it purlwise, and purl with normal. So it just goes back, front, and I think it's honestly a pretty easy sequence to follow. So you keep going like that all the way to the end, you flip, you do your cast on, and that's your pattern. And then I'm alternating, so I'm doing a red row, a green row, and then a blue row. But I think this is honestly pretty straightforward. You can see I'm making a pretty deep V. I think if I wanted this to be less deep, I wouldn't do the increases every single row on every side. I would still do both sides, but maybe like every 4 or something like that, right? My yarn management might be important to add. So I have my 3 balls. I'm knitting with not mohair, alpaca and sock yarn, just because I wanted really saturated RGB colors in my local yarn store. Like, this is just what they had, and I wanted to make it a little thicker. I did condense the balls so that they come out more together, but I wouldn't recommend having 6 strands. In order to make this manageable, when I'm knitting, I only flip to the left and then back this way. If you flip this way continuously, your strands are going to tangle really badly. So as long as you knit this way, flip back to him, knit this way, flip back the same, it shouldn't tangle too much. And then I keep mine in a little tray, but you could also do a little baggie. So I think that was important to just add. Also, to cast this on, it's really simple. It's just the same pattern that I was showing you, but I used US size 9. My yarn is about DK weight, I think. Cast on 2 stitches in your first color. For me, that's red. And then flip it to the other side. You're going to slip 1 stitch purlwise and then knit it. Flip it to the wrong side. You're going to backwards loop cast on, like we talked about, 2 stitches in your first color, and then bring in your next color. So in this case, it's green. And then work in your next color, so you do the same pattern I showed you, like yarn in back, slip stitch, yarn in back, slip a stitch, purl, yarn in back, slip a stitch, etc. to the end. Then you flip it again, row 3. Then you bring in your third color, but backwards loop cast on in your second color, which is green. So cast on 2 green stitches, and then you work in the same pattern for the right side. Slip with the yarn in front, knit 1, slip with the yarn in front, knit 1. And then you just work as normal. So it's pretty much exactly the same, just starting from 2 stitches so that you can have a point. That's it. Happy making!